Alright, my little math friends, here we are. We are back. Now we're going to be moving into chapter 12, and it's going to be on something called probability. And that's how we're going to end in our math book this year. We got chapters 12 and 13. They're going to deal with probability. And here's what probability is. It is the chance that something will happen. Okay, so for example, a real common thing, if we were going to flip a coin, okay, not a water bottle. We're not going to be flipping water bottles. All right, we're going to flip a coin. If we were going to flip a coin and it landed on heads, okay, we would want to know what are the chances of flipping a coin and it landing on heads. Okay, most people, when they think about this situation, would say, well, you have a 1 out of 2 chance that it'll land on heads, okay, because your coin has heads or tails, and there's only one side that's heads. So when you flip it, it's like a 50-50 chance. Okay, that's how people would state that. I'm sure you guys have said that before. When we're looking at probability, we get into some different forms, some different math forms to show this same thing, like 1 out of 2 chances. So if we were going to express that as a fraction, we would say you would have 1 out of 2 chances, and we would write it like that. You have a half a chance of it landing on heads. Okay, we could also turn that fraction into a ratio. A ratio is just a sideways fraction. Okay, that's all it is. It's just a fancy word for a sideways fraction. And it looks like this, 1, and instead of a fraction bar, we use these 2 dots, a colon, and we go like that, 1 out of 2. Alright, we could also make it into a percent, which is the way that I kind of like it because it's easier to look at. So again, we can take this fraction like 1/2, make it into a percent. 1 divided by 2 equals 0.5, and then you move that decimal point 2 places, and that gives you 50%. Okay, so 3 different ways that we can show the probability, the chance of it landing on heads: fraction, ratio, and percent. Okay, so now let's take a look at calculating probability. Most of the time, probability is shown as a fraction. Okay, like this guy up here, and then we can change it into some other things. And what probability is, it is on the top of the fraction, you have how many, okay, how many of something could happen, like for example, how many times it could land on heads, and we have on the bottom the total possible. Okay, so that's what our fraction looks like when we're looking at probability. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples to see how we would go about calculating probability. So here's our first example to calculate the probability of rolling a 2 on a dice. Okay, so looking at a dice has 6 sides. Okay, and how many 2s do we have on a dice? That's going to be our top number here. We only have 1 2 on a dice. So if we were going to set this up as a fraction, we would say we have 1 2. Okay, that's how many that we have of getting a 2. And we have the total possible sides is 6. So our fraction for probability would be we have a 1 out of 6 chance of getting a 2 when rolling a dice. We could turn that fraction sideways, make it into a ratio to say 1 out of 6. We could also make that into a percent by taking 1 divided by 6, and that's going to get us 0.17 if we round that, and then we can make that into a percent by moving your decimal 2 places, and you could get 17%. Okay, so 3 different ways you could show what the probability is of rolling a 2. Alright, here's another example. Calculate the probability of picking a purple marble from a jar that contains 10 green marbles and 15 purple marbles. Okay, so first we're going to make a fraction out of that because that's usually what probability is. So what we're looking for first is how many, and we want to know how many purple marbles there are in a jar because that is what we are picking, and we have 15 purple marbles. Okay, so how many we want is going to be on top of the fraction, and then the total possible, like all the marbles all together, if we take the 10 marbles and the 15 marbles, add them up, that's going to get us 25. Okay, and we could simplify that down. We could make that, divide them both by 5, 3 out of 5. So that would be our fraction to show what the probability is of getting a purple marble. Okay, we could turn that into a ratio by making the numbers go sideways to say 3 out of 5. We could also make that probability into a percent. 3 divided by 5 is going to get you 0.6. Move your decimal 2 places, gives you 60%. Okay, so that's the chances, that's the probability of picking a purple marble at random from the jar, if you were just going to pull a marble out of the jar. Alright? What we also have is a probability scale to predict the chance of something happening. Okay, so we have these words here, like it goes from impossible, which is a 0% chance of getting anything, all the way to certain, which is a 100% chance of something happening. Okay, so let's take a look at a situation and we will see where it's going to fall on this scale. So what are the chances you roll a dice and get a number greater than 1? Okay, so we're going to set up our fraction. How many numbers do we have that are greater than 1? Well, so that number on the top, we have 5 numbers on a dice that are greater than 1 out of 6 possible numbers. Okay, so there's our fraction. We can also make that into a ratio, just turning that sideways. We can't simplify that. We can make that into a percent. 5 divided by 6 gives you 0.83. Move that decimal point 2 places, 83%. Okay, so the percent works the best for using this scale, and if we look at 83%, that is going to go right about in here somewhere. So we would say that it is likely that you would roll a number greater than 1. Okay, that's how we would answer this question. Alright, we would say that it is likely on the scale. Okay, let's take a look at another situation. You reach into a bag with individual papers labeled 1 through 10. You pick a number greater than 3. Okay, so we're going to calculate the probability of picking a number greater than 3. So, how many numbers greater than 3 do we have in 1 through 10? Well, there are 7 of them, so that's how many that we want, is 7 up on top of the fraction. On the bottom, we have 10 possible numbers. Okay, we can make that into a ratio by turning that sideways. 7 out of 10 chance of getting a number greater than 3. We could also make that into a percentage. 7 divided by 10 is going to give you 0.7, and then you can move that decimal 2 places to give you 70%. Alright, so that's your chance of picking a number bigger than 3. And on our scale, that would fall pretty close to the 83, probably right about in there somewhere. So it still has a likely chance. So if someone asked us this question, what is your chances? You could tell them it was likely. All right? Alright, and that is it for our first lesson on Chapter 12. I hope that made some sense. Don't forget to do your try this problem at the end of this, and we'll see you guys next time in class.